You should learn from India. Do nothing that the Indians do.
Welcome to Needlessly Complicated, your safe space for hopefully almost rational outlook on life. Welcome to Needlessly Complicated, everybody, and welcome to the show, Yasha.
Hi, it's great to be here. We have some awesome follow-up this time. We have a lot to talk about. Recently, you were on Rubin Report, and he interviewed there. So there are 30 or how many people were there he interviewed, and you are the one who got selected from Germany. So why don't you tell us how it was?
First of all, it was awesome. He did a sign-up thing a couple of months ago, I think, and apparently over 1,000 people signed up, and somehow I got selected and I got to talk to Dave. And if you're wondering where you can find him at Rubin Report on Twitter, and his videos are up on YouTube and on Aura.tv. If you search for Rubin Report there, you'll find them. And the experience was amazing, and I connected to so many awesome people through that. Gained a lot of Twitter followers and a huge number of new listeners. So hello everybody who's new.
Yeah, I want to welcome all the listeners as well. Also, to new and old listeners as well, I want to tell you that it would be just great if you could please review us on iTunes, because it would really help us to grow. And also, if you want to, and that's in priority, the second thing we could do together is that you go to reddit.com/r/needlessly complicated, and there you can discuss our episodes, give some feedback. Or if you don't necessarily want to do that on Reddit, you can do this on Twitter. If you want to talk to Felix, then go to Twitter at @ReasonFelix, or if you want to tell me something, then at Yashoker. So let's do this and hopefully make the show better.
So today we have our first ever guest on Needlessly Complicated, and he was on the Rubin Report fan show too. It's Kushal from India, and he's living in Mumbai, and he's a 4th generation textile entrepreneur, but he's also a socio-political activist working on various projects in rural and urban India. And you can find him at Kushal_Mehra on Twitter, and you can find his blog at www.kushalmehra, and Mehra is with an H in front of the R.com. So welcome to the show, Kushal.
How's it going, guys?
It's great to have you here. We are really excited, at least. I am totally.
Yeah, I'm very excited too. We've been back and forth a while, and you seem to be a very interesting person. You have awesome stuff to say. But first, tell us a bit about your background. You're from India, and you are in the textile business and also doing political activism.
So, yeah, I'll share a bit of information about myself. So I was born in Mumbai, India. I basically originally belong to a northern Indian province. So my ethnicity is from a state in India called Punjab, but I was born in Mumbai. It's in a state called Maharashtra. It's more in the western part of India. And yeah, so basically, I am a 4th generation textile entrepreneur. So, so originally my great-great-great-grandfather was a textile entrepreneur in Amritsar in Punjab in India. So basically there was a migration of a certain community which was involved in the silk trade. So all the silk traders, they basically came down to Mumbai, and it's through that my entire family, my grandfather came, and then my father was born in Mumbai, and I'm here. So that's the entrepreneurial side. Other than that, I'm involved in a bit of activism on the social and the political scene. So I'm involved in a couple of projects in urban India and rural India. So I'll give you an example. I work with a member of parliament in India. So there is a a government of India scheme. And under that, every member of parliament is supposed to adopt 3 villages in a period of 5 years. So I'm working with this member of parliament from Mumbai, and I basically assist in the development of those villages. So what I do is I'll travel, visit the villages. I'll, basically do a survey, a holistic survey of the different indices. So we'll do a survey on the nutritional level or on the general health indices or maybe the electricity or the infrastructure. And then we'll form a report, and then we start working through, private and public enterprises. So wherever we find a government scheme, whatever we can apply to improve the situation. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds very interesting. A busy guy working on a local level and now working on a global level as well, with your appearance on the Rubin Report and your blogging, and your Twitter is very interesting too. So I guess one of the natural questions that we both are interested would be, how did you end up being interested in politics, and how did you end up applying for the Rubin Report fan show?
See, politics, actually, India is a very politically active country. So, if you look at our voting percentages in India too, we have a very high voting percentage. There are states in India where you have 85% of the people actually going out and voting. In the last national elections, I think it was around 65% of India that went out and 65% of the registered voters, obviously, went out and, cast a vote. So I've been actively involved in politics, I would say, for the last 6 to 7 years. It just came to a point that, it's always fascinated me and I really wanted to do it. Now onto the part of the Rubin Report. So I actually came across his show via another YouTube show. So I used to watch Ghad Sad's show regularly. He's a professor, I think from Montreal. So on his show, I saw Rubin being interviewed, and through that, I started watching a lot of his shows. And then they had this, thing where you're supposed to send an application, and I sent. So apparently there were 100 applications from India, and I was the lucky one. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, your interview was amazing, and if I remember the comments correctly, then a lot of people said that he should have you back there for a second interview, for a longer one, and that would be cool if that happened. But also, one of the main things you talked about there, and later with Felix on the separate stream, is the situation in India with multiculturalism and appeasement politics. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's very complicated in India. Secularism as a concept, if you look at secularism as a concept that it is being practiced in Europe or in America, in the basic Western world is pretty clear. It's about a separation of church and state. So in India, the secularism we practice, I don't even know if we should call it secularism. So I'll give you a few examples of how we do things in India. So you guys must be having a, uniform civil code, right? So everybody who stays in Germany will have a single civil law. So everybody gets to follow one kind of a law. But in India, it's not the case. So every religious sect in India has their own set of laws. So a Hindu will have a Hindu law. Muslims have Sharia in civil cases. So a Muslim in India can marry four women. A Muslim in India can divorce any of his wives by just uttering talaq, talaq, talaq thrice. So, there was recently on Twitter, I had actually shared a link with Felix too about a female in India. She basically got divorced by her husband. He just sent her a post. So it's like you sending me a postcard saying talaq, 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 and that's it. We're no longer husband and wife.
That one was ridiculous.
Yeah, so, this is one example. I'll give you another example of secularism in India. So in India, we cannot criticize certain communities at all. And it is because of this warped belief that we call secularism. We have blasphemy laws in India. Now, I'll tell you why it is extremely outrageous, because 80% of India is Hindu. or if we take all the Eastern, religions together, so it would be around 84%. So I'm talking about Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Jainism. So all four of them clubbed together. So 84% of this country at a religious level does not even have a concept of blasphemy. So we don't have that. We don't have blasphemy. We don't have apostasy in our religions, but we have a blasphemy law in India, and there's a history to it. And obviously I had explained a bit of it in the Rubin Report, but I would actually want to share a little more. So what happened is in 1926, in a reaction to a book written by a certain section of the Muslim community, a sect in Hindus called the Arya Samaj, they were very actively criticizing Islam at that time. And a publisher wrote a book called the Rangila Rasool. Now, the Rangila Rasool is a Hindi word. So what it means in English is Prophet Muhammad the Casanova. So the book was about the wives of Prophet Muhammad and his sex life. So at that time, the Muslim community in India did not like it. So there was a lot of rioting. And eventually, the publisher was taken to court under a law which also exists in India that is called 153A. And he was imprisoned for 6 months. Post that, they were not happy. So they wanted an even stricter punishment. So the British government, it was at that time, the British government came up with this law called 295A. And both these laws, by the way, 153A and 295A, both are still existing in our constitution. And the saddest part is that publisher was eventually murdered. He passed away. And even after the British have gone, it's a tragedy that no Indian government has actually even had the guts to even have a discussion about removal of such laws. I mean, and I'm telling you, if you even discuss this in India, there would be riots on the streets. There would be humongous outrage. People will not tolerate it. Another recent example, a guy called Kamlesh Tiwari, he criticized and made a very silly remark about Prophet Muhammad. But my whole point is he should have been allowed to make that remark. But they came down like a pack of wolves on him, and he's in jail right now. And the worst part is, post he goes in jail, there was an imam or a mullah who came on TV and he actually announced this. It was so shocking. He said, anybody who chops Kamlesh Tiwari's head off and brings it to him, he'll give him a cash prize of 51 lakh Indian rupees. So that's like 5 million Indian rupees. It is ridiculous. And after that, there was a huge mob of Muslims in a state in India called Bengal. And they were rioting for like 2-3 days. And the worst part about Indian secularism is the media doesn't cover any of this. So we actually come to know about it thanks to social media. So, there might be some local residents in Bengal who might take photos. And trust me, when they take photos, they're putting their life at risk too. But they still do it, and that's how we come to know. The media will, you'll have a bite here or a bite there. And if you compare this with, say, I'll give you an example. If anybody in the Hindu community would do something like this, or even 1/100th of this in terms of intensity, I can guarantee you the Indian media would go after them, which they should, by the way. They should go after them. It doesn't matter if they're Hindu or Muslim. But the intensity just dies down in India. And that's what Indian secularism is. So even if you are in Germany and you happen to meet a lot of Indians over there and you discuss secularism with them, they would not have a very positive opinion about this word. I mean, Felix, we've had a few chats by now. So, Felix knows how I cringe when the word secularism is actually used, because we have such a trauma associated to it.
So when this law came into practice first, was it implemented because of fear of the Muslim community or fear of violence from the Muslim community, or was it implemented because people back then thought it would be the correct thing not to criticize any religious group?
Honestly, it was out of fear. The British just did not want to deal with it. See, you have to understand, Hindus and Muslims have consistently had a few skirmishes here and there. I mean, we have a very checkered history. So you have to understand, the first Islamic invasion of India was by a gentleman called Muhammad ibn Qasim. It was in 710 AD. So since then we've had Islamic invasions and, all in all, I would say out of the 365 days of the year, Hindus and Muslims stay peacefully for 360 days. There are these odd nut jobs on both sides that, would fight. I think the majority population of India is very peaceful. But yes, these laws are definitely out of fear. I mean, the British just didn't want to deal with it. But my question today is, why is the Indian government not doing anything? And it doesn't matter which government it is. India has primarily been governed by a party called the Congress Party, which was basically, a group which fought the freedom movement of India. And initially for the next 50 years of India's independence, we really did not have opposition. It is only in the 90s, post certain events, that India really had an opposition called the Bharatiya Janata Party, which happens to be the current ruling government of India. So both the governments don't deal with this. It's just weird. I mean, you can't criticize religion in India. I mean, you can until they don't find out and they don't get offended. It's like that.
Yeah.
So India seems to be a guinea pig for this multiculturalism, really just full blown. But what I wanted to ask is that what if India decides to now use one universal law for all communities in India? Wouldn't there be even more conflicts right now because of the whole situation?
Actually, I'm really grateful you've asked me this question because the Indian Constitution has two parts. So there is the articles that are basically the norm and the law, and then there was something called the Directive Principles. So the Directive Principles could be what we can call as the ultimate vision that, okay, we're not doing this now, but we eventually want to go there. So I think it was Article 44 of the Directive Principles that clearly states that the government of India will form a uniform civil code for India. But guess what? India got independence in 1947. We are in 2016. We still have not done it. But obviously the Bharatiya Janata Party, the current ruling party of India, one of the things and one of their electoral planks has always been, we'll get a uniform civil code. But you have to understand, for that you need numbers in the Indian parliament, because that's a major change. Also, there is this huge fear of the Muslim backlash in India. It's a huge fear, and it's a genuine fear because you don't know. But I honestly feel, India has 14% Muslims. At least half of that population is Muslim women. And as a Hindu, I feel outraged because, we are the majority population in this country, and it is our moral responsibility to take care of our fellow citizens. And, I have heard cases of Muslim women being, divorced over Skype. Can you believe that?
Well, I certainly can't. I'm believing you now, but I don't want to believe it, I guess.
It's ridiculous. I would recommend you guys, if you ever get to read a book, it's called The World of Fatwas. It's by an Indian author called Arun Shauri. And even if you don't read the entire book, just the last chapter, it has documented evidences of how people get divorced over Skype, over postcards. And it's so sad. What do we do? And these women are under constant threat. Imagine. So under Sharia law, a female's testimony is worth half of a male's testimony. So how is she ever going to get a divorce from a man? It's just not possible.
Yeah, that's true.
It's so sad.
So you mentioned that there is actually a party who tries to get a unified civil court. How big is the support on the ground for this party, or for this idea at least? Because I can imagine with big parts of India being quite rural, getting political activism going in these areas might be quite hard. Or am I completely wrong here?
So the party that is in favor of getting a uniform civil code is called the BJP, the Bharatiya Janata Party. So it basically means the Indian People's Party. That's the translation. I've given you a literal translation. They've always had this plank that we will bring a uniform civil code. in their first term, which was, I think, from 1998 to 2004, they really did not have the numbers in the parliament. But this time they do in the lower house, not in the upper house. So we have the system of the Lok Sabha. The Lok Sabha is where the people elect their representatives, and the Rajya Sabha is where the state representatives elect their members of parliament. So unfortunately, we don't have the numbers in the Rajya Sabha, so I don't think so it will get passed. But yes, I think this country, we are having a conversation about the Uniform Civil Code at least. And I'm not saying it's a huge conversation, but the BJP has a very good representation right now in India. I think we have 29 states, and BJP and its allies are in 12 states. And the party which was historically the largest party in India, the Congress party. Right now, I think the Congress and its allies are reduced to 6 states. So at least right now our political scenario is surrounded around BJP. I don't expect BJP to pass it in this term, but if they get another term, I think we'll have a uniform civil code in India. I'm pretty positive about it, but you never know. I don't know what the repercussions of that would be. Nobody knows that. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I wouldn't even dare to imagine that. It's a scary scenario.
Yeah, it sounds scary. But listen, this fear of violent outbreaks, that's a theme going around the world, kind of. Well, we have the same with the refugees coming to Germany, which are Muslim to a big percentage, and there's fears of violence coming between German locals and the refugees, and we have violence running rampant across Muslim countries in a lot of areas when it comes to cultural clashes between different groups and Muslims.
See, clashes are always going to be there because of this problem with Islam. I think I don't really want to, typecast all Muslims, because I believe a majority of Muslims are just like you and me. They just want to do their job, go home, and, just live a normal life. What happens is, I think the basic structure, how Islam or all Abrahamic religions are structured, is very rigid. It's very exclusivist. And in that sense, I see Muslims tend to have a larger problem assimilating when they migrate in the West. And it's just, a symptomatic thing. And I think it stems from the fact that Islam is a far newer religion in comparison to Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, and I think Muslims still take their religion a little too seriously. I think we need to, over a period of time, communities mature. I mean, they might be nominally religious, but really not serious. I think what you have right now with Christianity is Christians are just nominal Christians, so they would probably go to church or not go to church. That kind of a thing. Muslims tend to follow the religion a lot more, and the hold of the ulama, the Maulvi, is still very high, and there is no, permission to interpret Islam for the common man. That to me is the crux of the problem. Nobody can interpret the Quran. Like, I, as a nominal Muslim, cannot say, this is my interpretation of the Quran, I'm going to follow it. There is this system where only the ulama does it. It's a little problematic. So I'll give you an example. Recently, there was a TV debate in one of India's mainstream channels, and there were 2 Muslim women and a man and a Maulvi. And, the women were saying, we need to get rid of this. And, the Maulvi goes crazy. And he basically says, God wanted you to be this, so stick with it.
That sounds crazy.
But it is like that. I mean, what do you do? I mean, it's medieval rubbish. That's all I call it.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, so if you think about at least the Christian religion, they had the big Reformation with the evangelical Christians springing from there, where they addressed all these similar issues. For example, interpreting the Bible in that case, that was opened up to the common man and was translated. So yeah, it really feels like the Islam needs that so badly right now, but can we really achieve that now and quickly?
But I think there are ideological differences as well. For example, Islam is mostly political as well. Christianity has a has something good for itself going there, because it separates politics from religion. You can't really do that with Islam. So this creates a bigger issue. So I don't think that it's even 100% certain that we can have an Islamic reformation, kinda.
I'm positive about it, because, and I believe the Indian Muslim is a great example of that. I think, whatever Muslims I've come across with my travels around the world, I have a very positive view of the Indian Muslim. Yes, I am quoting incidents of, mob violence in India from the Muslim community. But I think by and large, the Muslim community in India is, it still has its connections to its Hindu roots. And that's where the answer lies. Muslims need the right heroes. The problem is Muslims are made to, worship the ones who invaded India. See, I mean, they're just worshipping the wrong heroes. I believe there are enough good Muslims in India that if they get promoted, I mean, I'll give you an example. If on the global stage we would promote a Majid Nawaz or a Tariq Fatah or
Sarah
Haider or Asra Numani or all these, good Muslims. I mean, yeah, I know Sarah Haider calls herself an ex-Muslim, or Ali Rizvi, he's also written a book called The Muslim Atheist. I think these kind of people need to come out in the open. The problem is all these people who are coming out in the open and speaking, they're in the West because they know they cannot do it in Muslim nations and they're scared to do it in India. That's my problem. I believe in India, if we have these kind of people talking, and now I see this, Tariq Fatah, he gets airtime on Indian news channels regularly. So it's a good thing. I'm really glad that this is happening. And, by nature, I'm a positive person. I like to think, positively. So I believe there is a change. It is possible. And, you need to have a multi-pronged approach. It cannot be only one solution. So, maybe some people need to start talking about this Islamic tradition of the Mutazilites, who are the rationalists in Islam. Somebody needs to promote atheism in general, because I see this typical problem with Abrahamic religions because of blasphemy and apostasy. It comes to a point that, most people tend to reject the whole thing, unlike Hinduism, where, you don't need to really reject Hinduism to be a disbeliever. Like, I'm prime example. I'm a Hindu atheist, and Hinduism is okay with that. So that's where the dialogue has to happen. I'm very positive. At least I believe Indian Muslims can really share a great example. At least let's hope for the best.
Yeah, let's do so. Unfortunately, though, if you think about what's been happening in the West and with the left in the West, you see time and time again that we are failing people like the reformist Muslims and ex-Muslims we just mentioned. It seems like the left is actively trying to sabotage them, so that's not a good sign. So we have to even fight a war on multiple fronts against their ideas, and that's very unfortunate, I think.
It's actually a very important point that you have raised, and this is where the blame lies. The destruction of India single-handedly lies in this left-leaning ideology. Now, I personally do not consider myself to be a left-winger or a right-winger. I hate these classifications, and, I don't like to club myself into any corner. I mean, I always say this, I'm like a bird. I need both wings to fly. So I'm not going to call myself a left-winger or a right-winger. But in India, the entire political scenario, it is full of appeasement politics. So, I'll give you an example. So 1986, a very famous case happened where a Muslim woman, female, went to court for, because her husband had given her a triple talaq. She went to court. She won the case. Shah Bano was the name of the female. She won the case, and the court said, you know what? You will have to pay maintenance to this female. Guess what happened? The Muslim lobby really started getting angry, and the then Prime Minister of India, Rajiv Gandhi, he basically passed this bill that would stop any change in religious laws. And that's what destroyed this. So this is where India's problem lies. I don't blame the Muslims completely. I blame the politicians of India, because they know if they pander to the ulama has a control over a mass Muslim vote. So you have to understand, in India, minorities vote as a bloc. They all vote for one particular party. So you'll usually find the Muslim vote will never be scattered. It will be the Hindu vote that will be scattered. The Christian vote and the Muslim vote in India overwhelmingly votes for the left. So the left will never really go against them, because they are the reason they win the election, because the Hindu vote gets splintered and then the Muslims vote en bloc and they come to power. So this is the problem. And see, when we were conversing, this is what I really wanted to tell you, that I see the same trend happening in Europe. Your politicians are doing the same thing. All these migrants are coming in. They know very well these migrants will not vote for the right of your country. They want their votes. They want to stay in power, and they'll go on giving this leeway to Muslims in Europe. And my fear is that it might end up just like India, where you'll have different civil laws for different communities. And, it's a very problematic situation. It's horrifying, actually. And I fear this happening in your country, because it's already happened in India. India is the prime example of the psychosis of the leftist mind.
It sounds like it. And listen, I mean, in the UK, wasn't there a short time or still where they actually had Sharia courts for things like divorce already?
I think that was more like an arbitration. It was not enshrined in the constitution or not allowed legally. I think you have to understand, every culture has its own, arbitration system. Even in India, we have these systems where nobody wants to have a contested divorce. So what happens is every community has this arbitration place where the boys' side and the girls' side goes, and the community leaders sit together and they sort out the issue. The girl gets a good chunk of money or a maintenance, whatever is agreed upon. And then they go and file a mutual consent divorce in the courts. See, nobody wants to contest a divorce, right? And in India, especially, the court proceedings go on forever. I mean, they just never stop. There are cases which are happening pre-independence. I'm not joking.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. So we have a horrifying judiciary in India. So that's why I think what you have in England is something similar to that. It's a community-based arbitration where people go if they have problems, and they basically try to solve their problems through the Quran and the Hadith. That's what they're doing. I don't think so it has any legal weightage, but what's happening is they're constantly trying to make it legal. So I don't know how far the left will go in Europe. My fear is in the next 25 years, if the Muslim population is going to increase, they will become a significant vote bank. Once they become a significant vote bank, politicians across the world are the same. They are no different in India and Europe and even America. They will appease. I mean, what's happening with the Latinos in America, right? So the right wing knows they need the Christian vote. So they'll say Mexican immigrants are bad. And the left wing knows these guys are all going to vote for us. So they'll say, oh, we love illegal immigrants. It's vote bank politics. See, it's just that this term may not be very popular in the Western political circles, but it's essentially vote bank politics. But right now, you guys do not have a Muslim population that can be a significant vote bank. That's my thing.
So how can we avoid these issues in Europe? Because we still want to accept some refugees, right? Just people who are coming from countries that are not stabilized. We don't want to just shut down the borders, but we still need to avoid this conflict. So how can we do that? Actually,
I mean, first of all, you should learn from India. Do nothing that the Indians do. So you have to do that. See, every country, and I always say this, the constitution of every country is secular. I understand. The law has to treat everybody as a single unit. But each nation has to have an ethos, right? I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to say.
So yes, I mean, it's kind of demonized to say that in Germany, but I agree, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, what is the grand narrative of Germany? I mean, I'll give you my answer. I believe in secularism. I believe India should treat every person as a single unit. But I definitely believe India has a grand narrative, and that grand narrative is Eastern. I don't want to call it Hindu because there are different schools of thought, but I like to use the word dharmic. India does have a dharmic ethos. So why should I shy away from that ethos? And this is what happens in India. You can't even say you're a proud Hindu. And I'm not making this up. If you say you're a proud Hindu, you'll be immediately bracketed as a fascist, right-wing bigot.
Same here.
And you know what the funny part is? India does not even have a right wing. I'll explain how. So the BJP is called the right wing party in India. So correct me if I'm wrong. In the West, right wing parties usually stand for free markets, right?
Well, yeah, in Germany it's a bit difficult, but if you look to America, certainly.
Although right wing is also usually related to nationalism.
Yes, I agree. But the first definition of right wing and left wing would be on economic indices, right? Economic policies.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. In India, we don't have a right wing economically. So even the BJP believes in socialism.
Wow.
It is as socialist as it gets. So there is no difference in terms of economic policies. Now we come on the social right and the social left in the West. Now here's my problem. And I say this, why India cannot have a right wing. Because again, it stems from the difference between Eastern religions and Western. I don't even call them religions. India actually does not even have religions. What India has is different thought that are interlinked to each other, very nuanced way. And that, I mean, I call that mixed bowl of different vegetables. And that base is called Hinduism. That's what it is. Now, in that, so when you have this fear, and if you remember in our conversation that we had, the Google Hangout, every time Brendan, I think Brendan and you had this, fear of nationalism, and you saw how I was laughing, if you remember.
I remember.
Yeah, so, I mean, in India, nationalism is not frowned upon, although the Indian left is definitely trying to frown upon nationalism. See, here's the thing. The reaction to nationalism is you'll have a theocratic state, right? In Europe?
Well, not in Germany, I would say. If the left becomes strong, they wouldn't implement Christianity again.
But your fear of the right coming in is they'll have a Christian state, or they will be very xenophobic, they'll have other religions. Now, that's the problem with India. See, you have to understand, the Western forms of nationalism, you have only two forms. You have the French and Americans who have the civic nationalism, which is constitutional nationalism, right? And the other the other European states have this form of nationalism, which is ethnic nationalism. So it was based on a concept of a race or a language or a single identity. Now here's the thing in India. Every state has different languages. Every state has different cuisines. We are a multilingual, multiracial, multi-cuisine society. So if somebody says, oh, the BJP will impose a Hindu nationalist ethos on India, I always ask them, which ethos will it be? I mean, can you answer that? I mean, because Hinduism has different sects. I'll give you an example. So there is a sect in Hinduism called the Arya Samaj. The Arya Samajis are monotheists. Yes, there is monotheism in Hinduism also, by the way. It's separate. Then you have the worshippers who worship idols. I like to call them icons. So they are the Murti Puja. We call it Murti Puja. So that's mainstream Hinduism today. Then there is a Hindu like me who's a skeptic. I'm allowed to be Hindu. I'm not outside. So when they say India will have a nationalistic fascist government, so will it be me, the skeptic, ruling the country? Will it be the Arya Samaji, or will it be the Hare Krishnas? Who will it be? I don't understand that. That's why this whole obsession in India of using Western Abrahamic lenses and then analyzing, it's like I'm going to Europe and I start analyzing you via my Hindu lenses. it would not be right. It's like that. But that's the problem. And that's why I believe India cannot have that issue, because Hinduism is so decentralized and pluralistic in itself. I'm not saying Hinduism does not have problems. Oh boy, we have a lot of problems. But my whole point is, this is not one of the problems. That's what I'm trying to indicate.
Okay, so taking it as a fact that India would always have to be very pluralistic and a national, unit or a national unified identity would be very hard. Can you foresee any way of getting around the problems of the appeasement politics and forming, I guess, a pluralistic national identity? How would you go about that?
I think we by and large, we have a nationalistic identity which is very pluralistic. In fact, every Indian you meet, you'll always say, they say we believe in, unity in diversity. That's our motto in India. And the thing is, I think there is a lot of illiteracy in the Muslim community in India. I believe everything is solvable by basically educating people. I think once the Muslim community starts getting educated outside the madrasas, because that's a big problem. They don't get educated in mainstream schools like probably you and me do. In India, Muslim kids tend to go to these madrasas, which are faith-based schools, basically. So their focus is more on the Quran. So their worldview is restricted. So once we start having, an education where our worldview is not restricted, I believe, it will change. I think there are positive changes happening. I am very positive that in the next 20 years, we will control that, because, demography does matter. See, I'll give you, I don't want to scare you, but this is what happens where the Muslim population, reaches what I call the critical level. So we have a state in India called Jammu and Kashmir. It is basically predominantly Muslim. So in 1989-90, the Hindus out of that state were massacred and thrown out. They're called the Kashmiri Pandits. But every time in India, even a small incident happens in regards to the Muslim community, it will be blown out of proportion. And nobody wants to talk about the Kashmiris out of India. Imagine there are communities in India who are refugees within India.
That's weird.
Yeah, it is. It is so shocking, right? But it's a trend. So the only thing is, how do we control the population? Because Muslims tend to reproduce a lot more. Even in India, their reproduction rates are much higher than every other community. It has dropped a hell of a lot in India. In the last census, there was significant drop in Muslim birth rates too, but it's still very high. And that's my worry. See, once the number changes, that's when the great game changes. I mean, this is my worry. And in India, we have 14% of the population is Muslim. Now, how do we deal with that? I mean, we cannot go around telling Muslims not to have babies, but the whole problem lies in the education. I believe everybody needs to focus on educating people. But I guess that is an India-centric problem. So I would really not assume that Muslims who come to Europe are not really educated, but they still do the same things, right? So I really don't know what's the solution to that problem. Pertaining to Europe, I mean.
Well, I would say you're not far off with the solution here. I would kind of be on board with the whole education thing, be it from a slightly different angle. But what we have to stop do in, for example, Germany is to assume that these people come to our country and the moment they step across the border, they change into a perfect German citizen, right? So what we need is education on the level of the parents who come here and are already coming from a different cultural and political background, and educate them, but then crucially take the children they get who are then German children and educate them outside of their Islamic faith, because what tends to happen is that they get brought up within Muslim communities that the government supports are being formed, because they all bunch all of the immigrants in one place, and then they go to a mosque which probably has an imam that is sponsored from Saudi Arabia and was educated there instead of in a German university studying the Quran there. So he brings in those foreign values and concept and teaches those children. So I think you're not far off in saying we have to target the young people and maybe even the old people and educate them about what it is to live in a free Western society and about our values.
I think what they need to do is have some sort of an integration program, a social integration program where I believe at least every country should do that once you come into a nation as a citizen, I think they should have some kind of a program where, for the first 3 or 4 months, you have to attend a few courses about what the country's grand narrative is. This is what the country believes in. These are the values. So if you are staying here, you have to respect these values. I see no way out of this, or maybe it should be inculcated in the school curriculum. But then again, it comes down to the diseased leftist mindset, which will say, oh, how dare we have a grand narrative?
Well, I think they just actually want to preserve these cultures that want to come in, because if you forcefully integrate people, they will sell this as Islamophobia, because you're taking away their culture, which is deeply connected to their Islam. So that's the problem with regressive leftist mindset.
Yeah, that's the problem with cultural Marxism in general. It just simply doesn't work. It leads to conflict. It leads to, bloody conflict and escalation in many cases. And somehow we have to educate these people that cultural Marxism just doesn't work, especially when you put Muslims from not Muslim countries, but from the Middle East, which are, a lot of the countries, they are pretty underdeveloped and very rural, and you put them suddenly into a German city all in one area and tell them, oh, you can form your Muslim community there. I mean, what do you expect?
See, this is the thing. Now, I really don't have any study with me, but it would be fascinating to know that do all Muslims behave like this, or Muslims who come from the Middle East or say from Pakistan behave like this? I really doubt if Indian Muslims would behave like this if they went to Germany. I think they would tend to integrate a lot more. I think India's pluralistic nature is very much, a contribution of Muslims in India too. I won't say it's not they don't have any part to play with that. I believe it's majority of it is because of the basic nature of Hinduism. But yes, I think Muslims have also added, to that fabric. But it would be fascinating to know whether all Muslims do behave the same way in Europe or they don't. But, if you're not going to have a grand narrative in this country or in Europe, so what you have is basically community-wise ghettos, right?
Yeah, basically. Well, in Germany, at least, for a lot of the refugees that came, or migrants, I should say, because a lot of them are not actually refugees and never get their asylum application through. But all these people coming in now, the 1.3 million and counting, they are put into ghettos. Just this weekend, yesterday, I helped the aunt of my mother move out of an apartment building, because what happened was that all of the apartments in that building were bought off by the county and refugees were put in there. And then all of the tenants who were still living there were offered money to leave so they could put more refugees in there. And she was the last local tenant that was still there. And she eventually said, I'm sorry, I'm over 70. These are all young Muslim families. The cultural divide is too big and the house is now very loud because they all have children and they are very active, and I'm just an old lady and I can't just simply deal with this anymore. And then she took the money too and left. So what the government did was, instead of incentivizing to put one immigrant family with, let's say, 3 local families in one house and forcing them to interact with the local families, they bought out all the local families so the immigrants could all stay in one place. And I guess it's also for administrative reasons, so the county can deal with the whole living aspect more easily. But it's just the backwards way of how things should be done.
But that is psychotic. Why would you not want a immigrant or a migrant to integrate with the larger narrative?
I mean, I can't tell you what the thinking behind this is. I can't get behind this because it blows my mind. I mean, I just moved out her stuff and now the whole building is immigrant based. I don't know what they are really thinking. And then obviously because it's so many of them, we also build these places where they have to live in containers and are all bunched up closely together, which is a pure necessity because there's not enough living space for any of these 1.3 million and counting.
Oh man, you see, this is the thing. It happens in India too. Muslims tend to live together in certain areas and Hindus tend to live. It's not across India. I mean, obviously there are Muslims who live in Hindu areas too, but you'll rarely find Hindus living in a majority Muslim area. They tend to move out eventually. It has got to do with a lot of things because Hindus tend to be vegetarian, Muslims tend to be non-vegetarian. So that's a huge, clash. I mean, Hindus find it repulsive. The vegetarian Hindus do. I'm a non-vegetarian Hindu. So I personally don't care, but yeah, so it happens. So it's very interesting. It happens worldwide, I guess. Everywhere you have, Muslim migration into one area and then the other communities just run away out of there. There's no solution. I just don't see any solution other than people spreading. And I think we just have to go on talking about it, I guess. Everybody has to talk about this in their drawing rooms, over Skype, over podcasts like this. I just don't see any good solution right now other than just keep on discussing this. And I hope that the Muslim community also has these discussions amongst themselves because, I mean, if I was a Muslim, I'm thinking like that, I would want to be with the mainstream fabric of Germany, I guess. I would want to be if I was an immigrant there.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would be one of the easy ones then. So I guess this is a natural point to end this conversation because 1 hour has already ran out pretty quickly, but you just summed up our problems and the possible solutions so nicely. We have to move forward fighting the left on the denial of the proper solution, I guess. So it was a wonderful time having you on and we'll definitely invite you back, right, Yasha?
Yeah, of course. I think it was very exciting and I'm sure that the listeners will like this episode. So thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure, guys. It's really nice to connect with people from different cultures and different nations because, I mean, the world has a problem and it's really nice of you guys to have me over and I hope to have more and more of these conversations with you guys in the future.
Definitely. And listen, I mean, you from India get to school us Westerners who are usually prioritized, unfortunately, on our problems because you've seen them and you know what's coming and you even presented a solution. So we should listen to India, I guess. We should listen to India and see the obvious problems that are happening there and they're copied in our world. So Kushal, where can people find you and where can people connect with you?
So my Twitter handle is @Kushal_Mehra. So it would be KUSHAL_MEHRA. You can also go to my website and check out my blogs. My website is www.kushalmehra.com. I'm there on Facebook. You can add me on Facebook. I'm always willing to have a friendly conversation with everyone and share my experiences and learn from them too.
Okay, guys, go definitely check him out. He's a really nice guy. He has awesome ideas. Enjoyed the episode and want to make your voice heard? Head over to reddit.com/r/needlessly-complicated or get in touch via Twitter @ReasonPhilic for Felix and @Yashaka for Yasha. If you want to support the show, head over to iTunes and rate us, plus write us a review. It is the best way to support the podcast right now and help to grow the community. You can also share the podcast with your friends via social media or even better in person. See you in the next episode.